everybody. Welcome to your episode 242 of the At Percussion podcast. Today's date is July 12th, and if you're listening to this on release date, it is August 6th. With me today, as always, are Carly Vina.
Hey, everybody.
Ksenia Kamunovich.
Hey, Ben. Good job.
Thanks. Working on Ksenia's name for quite a while now. And the lovely Casey Cangelosi.
You know, people have told me Cangelosi is not how you say it, so you're probably saying my name wrong too.
Casey.
Yeah. No, really, like, people have told me. It's always singers. They're like, Cangelosi? Wait, how do you spell that? I'm like, well, like this. And they're like, that's not how you say it. I'm like, what? Well, okay, that's like how we've always said it. And then I've been to Italy several times, and I've confirmed, no, I say it right from where.
Do I need to do my Italian accent?
Well, you will in a minute. Because
with me today is Casey Cangelosi.
well, that's perfect segue, because today on August 6th is Barbara Strozzi's birthday. Hey, a cubanza. Scucarabanza, Bologna. Is that good?
That's wonderful.
Yeah. So she was born in 1619, and you've probably heard of Barbara Strozzi. She's really famous, and she's one of the most prolific, and probably the most prolific female composer and virtuoso vocalist, and I believe lutist from the Baroque era. So she's kind of one of those rare people that got her music out there as a female and didn't have to use a male pseudonym or anything like that. So today is her birthday, so happy birthday, Barbara Strozzi. Do y'all know anything about Barbara Strozzi?
Just now.
Just
nope.
that?
I mean, just applause for being a trailblazer.
Yeah.
Well, and she, one thing to say, her father was a poet and quite a famous poet, so I guess he had a lot to do with encouraging her and making sure her publications got out there. But she was one of the most prolific composers during her lifetime, male or female. So yeah, pretty cool. So happy birthday.
Well, our guests for today are Patti Niemi, returning. She was on At Percussion episode 99, and we convinced her to come back after all these about 150 episodes later, as well as Chris Deviney. Patti is a member of the San Francisco Opera Orchestra and was previously a member of the New World Symphony under Michael Tilson Thomas. She's recorded an album of Christopher Rous's chamber music with New York's Concordia Orchestra, including his Kuka Ilimoku and Ogun Batagri. Her memoir, Sticking It Out, recounts her journey to a professional music career. And Chris is the principal percussionist of the Philadelphia Orchestra and has also performed and recorded with the Houston Symphony, Toronto Symphony, and New York Philharmonic, among others. He's on the faculty of Temple University and has developed a line of mallets for innovative percussion. Chris also relatively recently arranged and performed Pat Metheny's Imaginary Day with Shi Wu and the Philadelphia Orchestra. So welcome, Patti and Chris.
Thank you.
Hello.
Well, to get started, since I already mentioned it, Chris, I would love to hear about this concerto project that you had with Shi Wu.
Well, it was a long time coming. Quite a few years ago. First of all, I should say I'm a huge Pat Metheny fan. I have been since I was young, very young. I consider him to be kind of the, both he and Lyle Mays, who just recently passed away, a keyboard player, the two of them, writing-wise, I consider them to be, in the jazz language, to be the most influential since maybe Ira and George Gershwin, really. And so anyway, as a fan, I was listening one day to the Imaginary Day album years ago, and three tracks in particular kind of struck me as being rather orchestral in nature. And I just got this idea that, like, what if that could somehow turn into a percussion concerto, or a duo percussion concerto specifically? Because I really do like the combination of vibraphone and marimba, harkening back to the double image days of Friedman Samuels. So I then started on this journey of trying to find Pat on a concert tour and ask him if it was okay if I pursued this. He was totally fine about it. I started arranging it for orchestra. So I just started taking the tracks and listening to what I heard. You know, this sounds kind of like a brass section. This kind of sounds string. This is kind of woodwind oriented, putting them all together. I had never orchestrated anything on this magnitude. But I just started into it, and then I pushed it in front of our administration, and to my surprise, they actually were very receptive to it. Unfortunately, we were also going through a music director change at the time, and that delayed it by years, like almost 10 years, before it finally got performed. And it did, and Chi Wu and I premiered it here in Philadelphia with the orchestra in 2017.
Not a bad duo partner at all, by the way.
I've known Chi for years. She and I taught together at Rutgers, where she was before moving to Northwestern. And I played duos with her and other projects with her. I've gone to her seminar. She and I actually hosted the Alan Abel orchestral seminar for 10 years together. So I've known her for a lot of years. And when it came to dividing up who was going to play marimba or vibes, I felt like probably marimba for Chi would be the best choice. So.
How can we hear it? Is it recorded? Is it published somewhere?
It's no, I did all the publishing. I can send you an MP3 of it, but it's not out on a professional recording.
Is there plans to do it again in the near future? I'm sure COVID put another couple of years in the way.
I meant to say that because literally March, the first week in March, I was actually in London rehearsing with there for 5 days to rehearse with to play it with the BBC concert orchestra.
Oh my God.
I came back on March 13th, Friday the 13th. We were supposed to have finals of our percussion audition on the 15th, Sunday. That actually got postponed, and March 16th hit, and the whole thing just basically fell apart. So I didn't get to go back over and play it. Hopefully they'll reschedule it. And that was COVID definitely affected that project.
It sucks.
That's heartbreaking. Bullseye COVID. You really hit that one on
Right on.
head.
Sorry to interrupt, because it reminds me. Ed Smith's World Percussion Group, D-Drum, had like the same thing with their Stuart Copeland concerto when a blizzard came through and screwed it all up.
What?
Dude, Pius Cheng wrote a ballet, and it's looking like it won't happen till 2022 or something.
Oh God.
That's why COVID happened. They just wanted to stop Pius Cheng.
Yeah, I'm all for it.
Sorry, Ksenia, go ahead.
It would probably take something like COVID to stop Pius Cheng.
Probably, yeah. Casey's not been trying hard enough recently.
Took a pandemic and miasma.
I wanted to ask about the reactions, your own reactions upon listening to your orchestration, because that must be really special. That's giant. And then the orchestra members' reactions, the audience reactions. How was all of that received?
I would say very well, actually. Percussion, I think, for the modern orchestra, we're kind of the last frontier, I kind of feel like. But surprisingly, even though that's kind of one of the last areas that's been fully discovered, it's also one of the ones that are easily dismissed or less willing to be tried for fear of the unknown. And so, of course, that was one of the things working against my piece, was because it was premiere. Could be really good, could be really bad. No one knows. And since we didn't have a music director, whoever was going to be coming in front of the orchestra was potentially on our short list for music director, and no one wanted to touch it, which I understand, because they want to tailor their own program when they come and conduct us. So I understand how these things work, but it was very frustrating. As far as the reaction goes, the audience, I think, dug it a lot.
They went crazy. It was wonderful.
Being modest, yeah.
But it was also, I was very nervous about putting any product in front of my colleagues, honestly, because these people I play with day to day, and I was constantly checking parts to make sure I didn't have wrong notes. I was literally putting individual parts in front of my own colleagues that I know and trust in the orchestra, and saying, "Hey, look at this. Does this visually look like something that you can easily play, or what looks odd about this?" And because the last thing I wanted was someone to be looking at my piece and saying, "Wait, what's this? This is terrible."
There's so much that can go wrong, like instruments transpose, and we've all seen that train wreck where it's the first rehearsal and the conductor just can't figure out why it sounds this way. It's like, oh, the parts in B flat or not in B flat, or
Totally. That's all I was sweating that for the last 3 months or so, 4 months leading up to it. That's all I was thinking about. I was kept up at night, actually.
Did Pat Metheny hear it?
I sent it to him, and I saw Pat a month before I premiered it at a concert in New Jersey. He happened to be in town, in the country, and he's a very nice guy. He's a very busy guy. He's constantly touring, and he basically I told him about it. He said, yeah, he actually had to do a retirement party for the president of his recording label, and he was going to be in New York the Saturday of the week we were doing it. He said, but I'm sorry, I can't come down to Philadelphia because I'm supposed to play New York Counterpoint for that retirement party, and I haven't played that in like 15 years, and I've got to practice. And when I heard that, I was like, well, okay, if he's not going to come to see me, then he's got a legit reason. But he didn't. I mean, to be fair, he also wasn't like, oh wow, I'm really excited. Well, he was just kind of like, all right, well, good luck with that,
Cool.
Well, Patti, when I was writing up your little bio to put on the Facebook post for this, I noticed that you recorded an album of Christopher Rous's music, which I mentioned. And Christopher Rouse passed away not too long ago. We talked about that on the podcast when he did. Did you work with Christopher Rouse on that?
I did not. No, that was already like 20 years ago now. I was spending a lot of time in New York at the time, and it was Maren Alsop's group. Obviously, she wasn't conducting any of that. So it was a group of freelance players from New York. It was great fun. I mean, it was a thrill to do it, but he wasn't involved directly in that.
Gotcha.
Well, he's had a kind of a long history though with the Philadelphia Orchestra. His family's from Philadelphia. They're known architects actually, so it wasn't just a musical connection. It was actually a logistical connection with the Philadelphia area that he became a known name here.
Wow.
Cool. Well, we've had a few legends in the percussion field pass away recently. I wanted to mention on today's episode that PAS Hall of Famer Joe Porcaro passed away just a few days ago. And his son, Jeff Porcaro, we all know as the drummer from Toto, but Joe was also quite a well-known drummer in his own right, played a lot with Emil Richards. And then one other name that's passed away recently, and actually we did a tribute episode to him a few episodes ago, was Alan Abel, who I'm sure Chris has quite a few experiences to share with us about Alan Abel, if you don't mind.
Yeah, it's very sad. Alan Abel was 91, and when people think, and he did die of COVID, when people think of, when they hear that, some people roll their eyes and say, well, he was 91, but you don't really understand until you meet this guy. He could have easily lived another 10 years or more. He was in great shape.
That's exactly what Ted Eck had said as well.
Yeah, very vivacious guy, and I've talked to many people who literally just saw him at PAS at PASIC in November, where he was walking around. He was always very proud to wear his Hall of Fame badge, which I'll never know what that's like, but I can imagine is a very understandably proud thing. And he loved just talking to people of all sorts, and he was a huge force in my life and many other people's lives. And it's really kind of sad for me to think that of all things that were gonna take this guy out, it was a COVID virus. I mean, it's hard to fathom, really.
Patti, I was going to ask, speaking of Alan Abel and this tribute episode we did, and everyone spoke so many great things about Mr. Abel's personality and just how he was as a person. And in your book, Sticking It Out, you shine a light on some not so nice teachers and not so nice culture that hopefully is going away and is less common. But I was just wondering, what's the status of your authorship? I feel like you were contemplating something new to write, or you were doing book tours way back when we were talking to you. What's shaking?
I've been in the process of writing another book for about let's see, maybe 5 or 6 years now. It takes a lot longer than I thought.
It's not like writing a paper for school.
Yeah, it's a lot harder, or at least it is for me. So
papers are pretty.
I thought it would be you know, having done it once, I thought, oh, well, now it's easier to get published. And at least I've found that that's not the case. It's still pretty hard. So
Sure. Can you tell us anything about it?
Is it post happily ever after, the winning a job, happiness, bliss?
A lot of it is, yeah. It's about music and opera. And I mean, I've been really lucky. This is well, until now, it was my 28th year with the opera. And I've just loved it to death. I mean, the playing I've done has been amazing. And the colleagues I've worked with, similar, you know, it's like we have had a lot of fun. So that's kind of what I wanted to write about, is just opera and music. And it ended up turning into, I mean, I kind of started it as fiction, and, you know, it's morphed a few times. And then I turned it back into basically a continuation of the first book. It's just the next 30 years or so.
Do you know what it'll be called yet?
I don't. Any
Is it
ideas?
going to be another cool pun?
I don't know. I didn't even come up with that title, so the publisher did.
Stuck it out. Pass.
It's actually pretty good.
That
That's
sounds
pretty good.
hanging it up, maybe. I'm getting close to retirement.
I'll take my royalty check.
Well, I wanted to ask a question actually about that, because I didn't have the privilege to be a host on the show when you were first a guest, Patti, but I read your book, and I appreciated learning about a lot of the growing pains that you were so open about. And a couple of the things that you mentioned about learning how to navigate the environment when you first entered New World. And I particularly think about the situation that you mentioned with your colleague, Laura, and how I think this is a very interesting sort of moral dilemma, especially for a lot of us who are educators or have any sort of influence on other people. But I guess the situation where you approached her with the other members of the section and spoke to her about her divided devotion, as you mentioned it, right?
Yeah.
Right. And for those of you who do not know, and I know a lot of people do, because I posted that I read the book and so many people texted me. They were like, oh, I read this. This is awesome. This is on my list, and so on. But for those of you who do not know, Laura was also accepted as the first generation New World Symphony percussionist, right? But one thing that sort of stood out about her was that she wasn't quite as driven as the rest of you, right? And so the three of you went and spoke to her, and I really wondered about that approach to a person when you sort of notice that they might not, that this might not be for them, but perhaps they're in denial. How do you gingerly have that conversation? And it seemed like she received it pretty well, right? You said that she was initially sad, but that she actually came to this idea that she should go and do missionary work. But can you please just share a little bit about that? Just because that's something that I think about a lot, and I think that she was very grateful you did the right thing, but it wasn't easy. It
was not easy. And in a way, I'm a little bit horrified thinking back now, because it sounds really arrogant and presumptuous for us to have done that. And in a way it was, you know, we were young, and maybe that's my only excuse. Mm-hmm. And like you said, it turned out well, because she ended up saying, you know, maybe this was the sign I was looking for, was you guys coming and talking to me. And we tried to be really kind and open, and we were just saying, you know, New World is really, even then, you know, New World, everybody knows what New World has become now, but even 32 years ago, it was the same. It was very, very pointed and narrow. It wasn't like even being in school. It was taking all the people who just wanted to play in an orchestra, who just wanted to take auditions, and putting them in one place. Mm-hmm. And so we felt like, you know, the playing we did down there was really intense, and our workload was heavy. And in addition to doing this heavy workload of playing, we were practicing all the time for auditions. Mm-hmm. So we felt like there was a disconnect with her. She was not doing that. She was not practicing. She was not doing quite the same amount of work that we were. And, you know, I mean, we're still friends. I love her to death. She's wonderful. And we all got over this very quickly. And again, you know, I do have some regrets about being so forward with her. But in the end, I think we were just trying to say, look, we're taking a lot of the workload that maybe someone else could come in and do. So.
Of course, and thank you. And I think you did. Of course, you presented that with that perspective. But I was just also wondering, how would you approach a similar situation now? Because you now have an even better understanding of whether someone can succeed, or whether they're devoted enough or not. How would you approach it now with this experience?
I think both of us run into this when we talk about students. I mean, if it's not an equal relationship, if you're talking to a student,
Mm-hmm.
we've talked about this, just about you're kind of obligated to be really honest with them.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there are many other paths to go. It's not just orchestral playing, of course. There are other paths. And if they have something in mind that could follow one of these paths, your job is to encourage all of that exploration.
Mm-hmm.
But you have to be honest about it. You're not doing anyone a favor if they're going into this incredibly narrow field, or like a 2-year graduate degree at Temple. You're not doing them a favor by not being really honest and saying, look, you need to catch up, or you need to, I don't know, I guess that's kind of my default, is like, if it's that kind of a relationship, a teacher student,
Mm-hmm.
be honest.
Yeah, along the same lines, quite a few times people have asked me my opinion about the field, or specifically going into orchestral playing, and my go-to answer for them usually is, if you can see yourself doing 2 or 3 other things and being just as happy as you can see yourself playing in an orchestra, then you should probably go do those things, because you're going to be up against people who only want to do the one thing. That's all they want to do.
Yeah.
And it's not that you can't compete against that. You can, but it's a lot harder, because they have one thing that's driving them all the time, every time. And you've got competing things that are telling you to spend your time doing, and eventually those things are going to collide.
Have you ever felt any pressure from, or you all probably haven't, and I know I haven't, because I've got a lot of students, but I know I've heard teachers say, well, we can't tell them to they shouldn't do this program, or they should drop out, or they should find something else to do, because then we won't have jobs, and then we won't have enrollment.
I think it's
like,
at that point it's
like, oh, sorry, Ben.
I was going to say, at that point it's sort of unethical. I mean, you can't
agree,
because basically, I mean, they have to pass their classes, and if they're not putting in the work, they can't pass the classes. So,
but it's a state we're in right now. Like a lot of
I know what you
programs.
Mean, though, yeah.
A lot of programs
I
in
mean,
the
I will
country.
say, in my experience, I've never had that pressure of do not drive any student away for any reason, and it's, yeah, I mean, it's like, I've had conversations about, I guess I always put it more of, and I'm not teaching people to take, orchestral auditions, but it becomes more of like, if you want a career in this, if you want to succeed in this, this is what you need to do. And it's up to you if you're willing to put the work in.
Yeah. So I think we agree it's not ethical, but like, can we tell anything to encourage those teachers to no, be ethical? You won't be fired.
I mean, I will say, this is not answering your question directly, but I talked to one of Jack Van Geem's former students a while back, and he said that Jack had this lovely thing he said, and I wish I could remember the quote, but it was along the lines of, when they first got on, he said something along the lines of like, I just want you to know that I will not be disappointed if you do not go on to have a career in music. And I think a lot of the time, once you get into a program, like you're afraid of like disappointing your teacher, your hero. And, if you get 3 years in and you decide it's not for you, but you don't want to disappoint them and you keep on pushing, then in 5 years, after you graduate, you can get into a really sticky, bad situation where you're just miserable. And it was because you were trying to make your undergrad teacher happy. So I don't know. That's my 2 cents about it. But
default phrase on Jack's part to say from the beginning. But I've had those conversations along the lines with a few students that have literally told me, to my surprise, wasn't even thinking about it, like, well, I just don't want to disappoint you. And I realized, oh wow, you're actually doing it from that perspective. You don't need to worry about that. Don't worry about that. I think you're a great person regardless. That part's not going to change anything.
I have another point to what Casey was saying about this feeling that a school is putting pressure on you in some way to keep the students coming in. I just remember Ruth Kahn talking to me. I studied with her for 6 years when I was a little kid, from age 12 to 18, and she's just the most wonderful teacher. And she had so much to say about, you can still teach music and you can still learn a tremendous amount from music. So we can keep teaching these students music. They don't have to be professional musicians, but it's like any incredible art form that they're learning from. So I think you can honestly keep teaching them, but the honest conversation comes about what do they do afterwards? What do they do with that knowledge? Do they need something else in their life that they're more attracted to?
Yeah, cool.
Well, Patti, looping back around to New World Symphony for just a minute, since you were talking about that, Carly, Ksenia, and I all spent time in Miami, and there was this thing that I heard sort of in the periphery at times that I didn't know how to feel about it. But for anyone unfamiliar, I guess for lack of a better way of putting it, New World Symphony is almost like a minor league symphony. It's a sort of elite training ground for recently graduated, Juilliard Temple sort of students. But anyway, the thing I wanted to ask is, like, people, I heard someone say it's something along the lines of sort of like, it's almost like slave labor. Like you're there, you're performing, but you're not really getting paid. And it is a very high quality orchestra. I mean, it's somewhere in between like a Juilliard orchestra and a professional orchestra. And that's kind of hard to come by. What are your thoughts on that dynamic, I guess is the right word?
That's a good question. I don't know the scene down there like I used to, obviously, because I started there 32 years ago. So it's a completely different scene as far as how the orchestra is received in the community.
Hey, you should tell them about when you first started, like.
Oh, it was awesome.
What the expectations were.
What do you mean expectations?
Well, you were signed for what, 3 months or something like that?
Yeah, actually, we showed up there. I mean, they came to audition went around to schools, auditioned. It was in the fall of 1987. And they said, well, we can commit to 3 months. That was what we were all going down there. But none of us had anything else to do. We're like, yay, we're desperate. So we showed up for 3 months. And then after that, it turned into the New World Symphony. It kept going. So we were all just thinking, this is what's going to happen. It evolved, in other words, and we kind of evolved with it. So when we were down there, it wasn't such a fixture in the community that it is now. So what you're saying, Ben, like, they give a lot to the community. Maybe there's a level of compensation that needs to reflect that. I can only kind of speak for what it was like when I was there, which is to make money practicing and playing music was just, it was pretty thrilling. So that's not to be all rose-colored glasses.
Yeah.
From Pollyanna, but that's how I felt at the time.
And I feel like I heard John Park said something, not about New World Symphony, but I think that transfers very well. It's like, you know what, like, you get free housing. I think they get a stipend for food. And it's like, if you don't like it, I mean, go do something else. But it's a fantastic sort of postgraduate learning opportunity for people that haven't won their orchestral audition yet, but are obviously very well on their way. Carly.
I threw this idea out there as well in the book. I think I said that, we got enough money to support ourselves, but not enough to like do anything else or have hobbies. So that was kind of good.
Yeah. Carly, I think you had something.
The analogy of
Chris, go ahead.
a minor league baseball team is actually very fair, because I talked to a minor league baseball player one time, and he was honest enough to tell me what they were making, and it was literally the equivalent of, I don't know, $26,000 a year, playing on a professional team, even though it's minor league, and I asked the guy, so it's not a money thing. Why do you do it? And he just kind of looked at me like, I don't understand the question. And that's how it is for the people that show up at New World Symphony. It's like, it's an opportunity to further your craft. And it's a good one, actually.
It's a good resume point too.
I think there's probably something in not being comfortable. Like, this is good for now, this is okay for now, but I can't do this. I mean, you can't stay at New World past 3 or 4 years anyway, but
great point.
Something.
Yeah, like we say to anyone who's down there, it's like, well, congratulations, now get out.
Right, now you're trying to get out as quickly as you can. Yeah.
Right. Well, Patti, I wanted to say, you and I have never met, and I wasn't on the show 3 years ago when you were on, but I read your book a couple years ago, and thank you so much for giving a voice to your stories, to the stories of anxiety and sexual harassment, because I think both of those issues are things that can be very isolating to people that are going through it. And it's just, I'm sure you hear all the time, it's a huge comfort to people who have had those experiences to know, here's a person who also felt this, and here's, in this case, here's where she is now. to successes. So thank you for that. I think it's a huge resource for our community as percussionists and as musicians, and I'm sure non-musicians read your book as well and can connect with so much that happens there. I wanted to ask, actually, both of you, segueing a little bit, we talked about the difficult conversation, maybe with students that aren't showing the right level of commitment or interest and maybe need to look elsewhere. Now in these really strange times, I think students and professionals alike, and everybody in between, might be having issues staying motivated and really efficient in practicing and continuing with projects. Do either of you have any tips or advice for staying on top of those kinds of things?
Right.
We're looking for silver bullets, please.
It's interesting for me, I would say, because my opera job is seasonal. It's 6 months a year. I've had like this COVID schedule for 30 years. I've had half a year where I've had to force myself to do other things, musical, non-musical, everything in between. So when this kind of hit, I was like, this is very weird. Everybody's on my schedule. Of course, it's going a lot longer. I mean, I'm not going to work till next May. That's the soonest they said we are going back. So
wow.
It's lasting a lot longer than normal, but this for me.
Sorry, next May being 2021 or 22?
2021. Sorry.
Okay, good.
I know, right? Well, that's sort of the earliest. So
Yeah.
hope we go back then.
For me, we've been doing online content. We actually had a virtual gala. I've contributed to here and there 2 or 3 projects that are very short. I have actually yet to be able to have full access to the hall where all of my instruments, or temple where the rest of my instruments are for students to practice on. Both are in lockdown. So I literally have had very limited access to practice at all. So as far as motivation goes, I'm very motivated to get back in practice. I had this conversation with students at Temple to finish out the semester. We had a series of online classes together, and I just tried to tell them that the ability to do this might be gone, but the ability to do this is still there. So on some level, you just got to basically just kind of transition and think of it differently. That's not to say that it's going to completely make up for the fact that we're in a really bad situation. All of us are. But there are things you can do to, rather than just completely hit pause and do nothing. So. And
we're also in a different place. We're older and on the backside of our careers. But I would say for young students, like if I were in this situation when I was still Juilliard or still at New World, kids that age are really great at self-motivation. You have to be. Nobody sits there and tells you to practice. So you just kind of have to take that to a different level. Like, okay, this is my schedule. I am making this schedule for myself. If your goal is to, go as pointed as taking auditions, think about those auditions that will eventually happen. That's all I would be able to do, I think, if I was still in that age range.
I mean, are you asking for specifics of if I was a student right now, what I would do?
Well, sure. If you have a specific answer like that, I think as far as motivation goes, I see it, it's something I'm hearing from my students, like off and on over the summer. It's a long summer, right? Just like sometimes we're up and sometimes we're down, and I see other people kind of experiencing the same, but.
Okay, well, let's say if I'm an undergrad and I know that I've got a recital of some substance coming up, but I wasn't originally thinking of doing it until maybe next spring. I would actually start to reevaluate. Maybe I can do that in the fall, and I should actually start putting together what would be a potential recital program, eliminating things that won't work, adding things that will work, checking in with my teacher, sending it to them, and getting timings down on all those pieces. Having clear ideas of how logistically those might work together to form the perfect recital that I want to put together and present. If I don't have access to instruments right now, what can I do to change that? Does that mean that I actually might need to pay somebody for the use of their instruments where I never had to consider that before? if I do have access to instruments, but it's limited, am I taking maximum advantages of the hours that those instruments are available? And right now, since everything seems to be online, ironically, as we're talking online, I would be searching out and seeking out the people that I have actually not had time to, or not really thought much about getting information from, because they're out there. Those people are out there. I can tell you, and Patti can too, with our careers, we've run into our number of people that are jerks out there. There's some out there, but there's not a whole lot of them out there, really.
All angels.
Well,
Angels.
I didn't really mention your name, but anyway, those people that want to help you are out there, but it's up to you to be proactive to search out those people, because you wouldn't want them contacting you constantly saying, hey, are you doing those things that I've been saying in my method books, or blah, blah, blah. That would be ridiculous. You wouldn't want that. But if you want their help, it's up to you to go and seek it out. And these days, it's even easier than ever, because you don't have to physically go and meet anyone. You can literally talk to them in their living room while you're in your living room. I mean, that's actually kind of a gift if you think about it.
It's like TAPS, man. That was lecture and Q&A overload. I mean, I was amazed. Chris and I both participated in the Ted Atcat's percussion seminar online, and just the roster he was able to gather of everyone. It was just really...
The funny thing is, as soon as that was wrapping up, then I see online Manhattan has their own version. And that's just as intensive, all the people on there.
Is that right?
And I just thought, oh my gosh, would that be overload if I had just gone through TAPS? Would I jump right into another one? Because it was very intensive.
But yeah, there's plenty to do.
There's also now there's a Steve Weiss marimba thing. I think Shi Wu is heading it. Yeah, there's so many of these. You just look at the roster and it's like, I can't imagine attending a camp with all those people in real life. But yeah, it is so easy.
One of my favorite phrases in life is, be careful what you ask for, you just might get it. You know what I mean? Because there is a lot of content out there, and you have to be selective about what you can really commit to and what's going to be effective for you. But, actually, to be more specific even, here's another idea to approach. If I were in a student, someone in the position of trying to take auditions for orchestras right now. Well, obviously there are no auditions for orchestras right now. Orchestras aren't even performing right now. Well, how do I approach that? Well, I would want to sit down and logistically maybe coordinate some of the materials that I have that have been spread out in various notebooks and that kind of a thing, and make it a lot more organized than I ever did before. I'd want to be checking with people who have taken auditions. Hey, can you send me that audition list from this other audition that I didn't take years ago to compare what might be expected to play once orchestras are back and running again? I would want to be diving deeper into some of the aspects that maybe I didn't have time to before, because I was literally just practicing excerpts or practicing scales or trying to improve my technique. There are still, I would want to be listening instead of just the 1 minute of the excerpt of the recording that I have. I want to listen to the whole recording and try to put that in context about, well, maybe that might provide a little bit more information as to my decisions on how I might practice and then execute these at an audition. Rather than just knowing that one little timpani pedaling passage, I want to know what happened 15 minutes before that or 8 minutes after. That kind of stuff actually means something. I hope you agree, Casey.
I wanted to mention one other. I wanted to mention one other thing with all this. So part of the reason that I asked Patti and Chris to be on the podcast today is that the San Francisco Opera Orchestra put out a little video featuring Patti. I think they're doing it for several of their musicians. But it was a lovely little glimpse into Patti's life right now. And one thing that I think we forget, and I hate to be the guy that after we're talking about serious, taking auditions and all this stuff, is we can also enjoy music. And obviously, if you're on the path of orchestral auditions, you need to keep your chops in shape and all. But Patti and Chris, I know, have been rocking out these hang drums that are sitting behind them. So could you tell us about how you got into those and how much fun you've been having with those?
You know what? It was driven by something that is portable, literally, because there's Kimmel. You can see Kimmel through the window, but I haven't been able to get in, and Chris can only get in to take things out of there. So it was kind of driven by that. I mean, we have just a limited number of things here. He actually brought a Glock over at one point there was an online thing, and
Yeah.
he had to practice with soft mallets here in the apartment, and then took it down to the storage room to record. So
It's been creative.
that's why
like
it was
that.
driven.
Yeah, it's just been creative as far as those particular instruments. Rolando Morales, who is a percussionist in Lion King on Broadway, and he went to Temple here. His brother Ricardo Morales plays principal clarinet in our orchestra. So Rolando, he's also one of the extras that plays with our orchestra from time to time. And he turned me on to these drums because the original drums were called hang drums from Belgium. They're essentially, instead of an inverted pan like a steel pan, it's a tortoiseshell, the opposite. But you play with your hand. You can play with mallets too. But he turned me on to these because these were new. They're called VAST, V-A-S-T. They're from Russia. And so I just bought a couple of them, not having any idea when I would ever use them. And they just sat in the percussion room for the longest time. And then lo and behold, it's like one of the few things that I can actually get my hands on now.
Flash jam. Let's hear it.
Oh, wow.
Wow, look at that. I thought they'd say no. They both.
They take
That
requests.
was awesome.
Very nice.
Awesome.
Cool.
And your Venmo is, we're just going to put a tag down there in the description box.
Well, it's nice to know there's an alternative to the other hung drums and I forget what the other brand is called, but the waiting list is like years and you got to win a lottery to get one made. And yeah, those sound good.
Rolando told me Rolando Morales, when he told me about these, the reason why he got these was because of that difficulty in acquiring the hang drums. Evidently, the guy that made them found out that people were selling them on eBay, and he got really mad. He decided that the only way he was going to sell them to somebody was if he actually met them in person, and he decided that they were worthy of selling them to. So
wow.
They would literally have to go to Belgium, I think outside of Brussels somewhere. And Rolando, who was on tour with Ron Carter, the bassist, the jazz bassist, he was on tour in Europe. And he had sent Ron Carter to this guy's house because he had to leave early. And Ron Carter shows up at this guy's house and knocked on his door. And this guy didn't recognize Ron Carter, but he didn't know that someone was coming by. And he said, yeah, I'm here to pick up the hang drum. And he said, no, you got the wrong place. He said, no, this is the right place. I was told to come. And he said, no, I don't have an appointment with you. Go away. And he turned Ron Carter away. So Ron Carter left. Oh yes. And so Ron Carter calls up. Yeah, he calls up Rolando and he said, "Did you give me the right address? Because this guy had no idea." He said, "No, it's the right address." The guy is very strange, but you just need to persist. He was still in town. He came back the next day, and the guy was so embarrassed that he had told Ron Carter to go away, and he invited him in, and of course he gave him the hang drum. But those drums are very difficult to acquire, and as proprietary kind of issues surface, someone else decided, I'll just make my own. So
it's like secondary to water phone. It sounds like the most difficult instrument to get. But go online and check out the website VAST, V-A-S-T. They're pretty creative.
Cool.
Those Russians, they will find a way around everything. Kidding. Love Russians, love them. I was going to ask, perhaps you guys have some more insight into this, but we've been reading a lot of articles recently about how orchestras choose to stay afloat or try to stay afloat, stay relevant, and the whole issue of whether giving away content, for free online is acceptable, or is that a way to keep your audience engaged? And we've seen your beautiful little fun videos that you've recorded for your respective orchestras, with you, Chris, playing at home on various things right there on your sort of in your kitchen, and then you sharing how you do Pilates, Patti. I mean, that's all really insightful, and it does make us feel more connected. We feel like, oh my God, these wonderful people. We're so happy that they're still going at it. But what do you feel like, especially that you have a perspective between opera and a symphony orchestra, what are their approaches? How does one float sort of through this storm? Do they have any brilliant ideas, or you think they're just going at it through a thick fog?
I think there's a little bit of fog.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of uncharted territory, and they're trying to navigate the best they can. And it's, I don't really think anyone has a true handle on the formula for giving away content versus charging for the content. But I think ultimately there's going to be a reckoning in the sense that there's no way you can continue to just give it all away.
Yeah.
And if the desire is there for people to consume that content, they're going to have to be an acknowledgement of what are they willing to give to get that content.
There was a great parallel with the New York Times when they first shifted from all print to starting to get online. And I remember the days when it was free. The New York Times was free online, and they did that to lure people in, and they took a huge risk. And then they switched to a subscription model. It was $15 a month to start with. Now it's $17. But at the time, they did it correctly. They lured everyone in. Everybody had this fantastic New York Times for free. And then, $15 a month, that's not a big deal. Somehow they did it. And now they have a really healthy subscription service online. And maybe that's a parallel that we need to be aware of. Yes, we can lure people in with free content, but how do we change it so that we're not just giving away incredible, especially not just performing musicians, but composers, people who spend their lives doing this. They create content, and to always give it away, is that fair? How do we monetize it somehow?
Of course.
I think it's difficult though, because obviously there's video and audio content out there for purchase for anybody at any given time for whatever they want. Literally, it's just compounding itself with the amount of material that's available. And yet the whole reason why we're in this business is for live performance, not for recorded performance. Right. So those two things are at odds in a way. Yeah. Providing content that's not live almost is kind of counter to what we're all about. So I don't really think there's a good formula for it yet, honestly.
Right. Okay. So we agree that we're all lost, but it's okay. We're all in the same storm.
Yeah. The thing is, if you're looking for us to give you answers, I don't think you're in the right spot.
How many emails have we gotten that say there's no COVID handbook? Uncharted territory. Well, Casey, I believe you had a little opera you wanted to share with us today that's actually pretty relevant to today's COVID issues.
Yeah, sure. So this opera was written in 2018, and it's called Semmelweiss. And Ignaz Semmelweiss was a doctor, and this is an opera by Ray Lustig. Patti, you're nodding. Do you know this opera?
No, we checked it out online. We just checked out a lot of info about it.
There was a link that we watched last night.
Yeah,
there was
cool.
From the opera. It was like a joint project in Hungary as well, right?
It looks like it's had a few performances. And, speaking of stuff being free or online or not, I was looking so hard for some recording of this opera or some place to stream it, and it looks like you could stream the premiere live 2 years ago, but I can't find a way to pay for it or anything. And of course that's probably because they were planning on doing live performances, but it does make me think that we're not really prepared for this, because it's such a shame that we can't see this right now, because I got really excited, and the little excerpt I'll show you is, I think, really just hauntingly cool, and I imagine you all will agree. But so it's called Semmelweiss, which is a last name of this doctor and physician named Ignaz Semmelweiss, who is a Hungarian doctor from the 1800s. And you might not know it, but doctors, it was not regular procedure to soap up and sanitize your hands until like literally like past the middle of the 19th century. And this guy played a big part in this. So this opera is like 75 minutes, and in fact, I'll
If I
probably
sorry to interrupt, Casey, but if I could add that in this interview that Casey sent us to check out, not only did they not wash their hands, it was a sign that you were a better doctor the dirtier you were, because that meant you would operate on more patients. Like it was actually a good thing to be dirty, which is mind blowing.
yeah, yeah, that's
Yeah.
like the opposite.
What I picked up from that interview was that the thinking back then, also there were lots of theories floating around as to why pathogens were, well, they didn't call them pathogens. They didn't know what it was.
Right.
But essentially, one theory was that there were particles of evil that floated and would land on people's hands. Particles of evil. I thought, wow, have we come a long way? Oh my gosh.
Well, it's been a theme with several of my topics, just kind of by coincidence, but superstition has been a huge part. I mean, I think superstition is why we still have racism today. I think it's why we still have people not washing their hands regarding COVID. We have people not wearing their masks. They just like don't believe the science they're being told, and they're superstitious about who to trust. And all of that is really, really kind of sad. So, but yeah, you're exactly right. And actually, he called these, the term he came up with was cadaver particulates. He said there are cadaver particulates on our hands because in his hospital ward, so Ignaz Semmelweiss was the like chief doctor at educational clinic. So he had students coming in, and there was the cadaver lab right here. Okay, students have to operate on cadavers. They have to examine them. They have to cut them open. And then right across the hallway was a maternity ward. So these doctors would literally deliver a baby, go over to the other room, work on a cadaver, and then go back to the maternity ward and just back and forth. And so he figured it out because supposedly one of the students cut their finger and then showed the same type of bedside fever as the mothers. And he said, well, wait a minute, like this looks way too similar to not be related. And so he said, okay, it has something to do with the cadaver area. So he said, okay, we're going to start using chlorine to wash our hands before we go into the maternity ward. Like, duh, oh my God, And so yeah, the chlorine, of course, killed the germs, but he didn't know what germs were. Like they literally didn't know what germs were as late as 1860 something.
He also talked about, or they were talking about, this doctor made a comment that the microscope was a toy. Get that toy away. So
Yeah.
talking about people that are the top of what's going on in their field, and even they sometimes don't even recognize the tools that will help them further their own field.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and something that didn't help is he didn't have a good explanation for it. He just said, I just know that the cadaver lab has something to do with it. And once we started chlorine, like our hands, the death rate just plummeted. And the graph is great. I mean, it goes like this, and I think it's like 1860 something, just like boom, it skyrockets down to the ground. It just totally goes to the ground. I think the percentage was 18.7 women, so almost 19% of women giving birth in that particular clinic died from bedside fever. And once they introduced this hand washing, it went down to 1%, and then they kept doing it and did it more thorough, and it went to 0. So he passed this around all around Vienna, and he didn't have a good explanation for it. So I guess his personality was
the particles of evil.
Yeah, right. Well, and what's funny is like some like particles of evil, or even he first explored if there's different groups of religious people in the two clinics. So in this clinic that has a low rate of death, are they of a different religious affiliation? Like there's so much superstition in the air, and just the progress towards germ theory. The first thing is called humoral theory. So that's what we've heard of in the medieval ages, where you used leeching and bloodletting and blistering, which is like disgusting because they really believed illness and disease was caused by an imbalance in the four liquids of the body, which is blood and the two biles and mucus. It's so they literally thought that's what you did. And then the era that Ignaz Semmelweiss is from is the miasma theory. So they believed that bad smells were what caused disease, which is a much better theory because we know bad smells are at least related. So he thought the chlorine, he noticed washing your hands with chlorine got rid of the cadaver smell. So he thought that's what was doing it. It got rid of the smell, thus it got no miasma going into the birthing room. But it was gnarly. I mean, there were women who were begged to not give birth in that clinic, in that hospital. There were people giving birth in the streets, in the alleys, instead of going into that clinic. And the mortality rates in the alleys were better than the mortality rates in the clinic. So, I mean, he was heart-wrenched by this, and he eventually suffered a mental breakdown. And I'm just going to read real quick from some program notes from the American Opera Project, Semmelweiss, a new 75-minute musical theater work inspired by a tragic story of the 19th century Hungarian obstetrician Ignaz Semmelweiss, and his dates are 1818 to 1865. So sometimes I hear it called an opera, sometimes I hear it called a musical. I think they're just kind of trying to be hip with what they call it so they don't brand it to opera people or musical people or not, but it's certainly opera. Like, you listen to it, it's opera. Let's see. So he discovered a cure for a devastating epidemic but could not convince the world of the simple solution and died alone in an asylum. Dr. Semmelweiss had been the first to see an unthinkable truth, that the deadly disease was passing from bodies of the dead to healthy mothers on unwashed hands of doctors themselves. Skipping down just a little bit.
What's that phrase, unwashed hands of doctors? Can you even, I mean, that's frightening to think about.
It's frightening.
That's the worst, yeah.
There's kind of a bigotry component to this too, because they said they had this Hungarian doctor trying to tell these gentlemen Vienna doctors what to do in Austria, and they're saying, like, what, don't tell us we have unclean hands, you know, like, you can't even explain this thing, we don't have that. Moving on just a little bit, through the year 2018, though the year 2018 marked the 200th birthday of Ignaz Semmelweiss, our world seems to still not have been absorbed the powerful lessons of this story. There has never been a more urgent moment in history to reflect on the mystery of insight, the tension between truth and hubris through cultural myopia. And the clear truth is that we as individuals and as a society need our outsiders, our fresh and brave ideas, literally to survive. Ksenia, you didn't think I knew that word myopia, did you?
No, I didn't. That's pretty impressive. Wow. Good job. Sticker.
You did mispronounce hubris, though.
I did. I know. Thank you. Yeah, hubris. Yeah, that's not a word you hear. I hear myopic and myopia more often than I hear hubris. But I just wanted to show you all a screen share. A quick little excerpt from it. And man, if you're watching, or if you're not watching, please turn to YouTube and watch, because the text is just like freaking haunting. So let's see. So yeah, just a quick little excerpt, and if you, oops, hang on, what am I doing? Sorry. Am I still screen sharing?
No.
No. Okay. Good. Yeah, I'm a little slow to Skype. I just wanted to mention the text that if you were just listening, you didn't see, but it goes. Let's see.
I was seeing text.
There were subtitles.
You saw it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just, for our listeners, I was just gonna say, and it just gives me chills. It says, look out, give birth. Unless you know it's Midwives' Day, unless you know what is the day. In the doctor's word, they'll make you stay, and believe me when I say you'll die that way. Stay away, or wait until it's Midwives' Day. So he's talking about, like, if you know it's just the midwives doing it, like if you're going to the midwives clinic, which I guess was a neighboring clinic that didn't have the cadaver lab right next to it, where the mortality rates were far, far lower, they're saying, like, go there. So it's all the pregnant women, and the choir is supposed to be, I guess, the spirits and the
also
people who died
in the interview, they talked about the midwives. It was part of their tradition, like the doctors wanted to be dirty. The midwives, it was their tradition to wash before they gave birth. And so, and when Edelweiss Semmelweiss was telling the doctors they needed to wash, they were like, no, that's what the women do. Like, we don't do that. We're doctors. So, yeah.
Don't listen to women.
Amazing.
They could not
Right.
be on the brink of knowledge at any time.
Yeah. So 2018, yeah, and it's just funny that how significant it is today. And a lot of people are talking about this doctor now. You see a lot of things on the YouTubes and the places like that, because all of a sudden he's super relevant all of a sudden again. But yeah, I thought I'd highlight the opera. I thought it was really cool. There's opera about it.
That is really
Cindy,
cool.
I think you had something.
I was just going to add, it reminded me of a couple of things. One was, there was an experiment that they did on pigeons, I think, and they would, release food into this cage or whatever it was at any certain time interval. And if the pigeon had happened to be, flapping its wings at the time the food was dispensed, it connected the two, the flapping and the food. So it gained this superstition that it should keep flapping its wings in order to receive food. And sometimes we as humans, I feel like we do the same. And just, thinking about medical progress, it's so interesting. If you read Bill Bryson's book about the body, most recently published one, which is so cool. I mean, so much of medical progress came by pure chance. A person getting shot accidentally and surviving, and a doctor being there and seeing a hole in the stomach and saying, "Will you, sir, let me pay for you to stay and live in my house while I examine you and keep you alive?" And the person said yes, and that's how we realized that there's like acidity in your stomach, which is insane. I mean, just imagine. But it helped the progress of science, medical science. So yeah, I mean, it's important to know that doctors try, I guess. And definitely nowadays, wash your hands against those evil particles, It's really important.
Wash your hands, wear a mask.
That book is on a stack of books next to my bed right now for me to read next.
Oh, really? Oh, I love it. The book is so cool. I highly recommend it.
Well, it just makes me think, like, what are we missing right now? If 200 years ago, or a little less than 200 years ago, we didn't know that, hey, wash your hands and it'll prevent the spread of disease. This work, Casey, thanks for sharing this with us all. I hadn't heard about it. It reminds me of the value of music and really all arts through these challenging times, especially in this case, because it's a commentary on current events. It's telling a story, and it's something that can help all of us kind of understand and cope with and get through these times, and hopefully learn from the past through art. So I thought it was a really, really nice story.
Well, Casey, thank you so much for sharing. I had one more thing I wanted to bring up before we wrapped, and we sort of joked about this before we started recording, but Patti and Chris actually have a cat named Steve Weiss. And Casey mentioned that Chris worked at Steve Weiss, which I did not know. And Chris worked at Steve Weiss Music, not Steve Weiss the cat. Steve Weiss is one of those just characters that just has such a reputation in our field. Could you tell us about I'm assuming it was during Steve Weiss's younger days that you worked there. Could you tell us about Steve Weiss? And there is Steve Weiss making his podcast appearance.
Here's our Steve.
Oh my God.
Yeah, our COVID cat. We didn't have a cat before COVID, and then it was a perfect opportunity.
And now you do.
Steve Weiss was also a very pivotal person in my life. When I came to Temple for grad school in '87, I started working for him off and on, part-time. Literally, he would pay me in instruments. He didn't pay me in any money. I literally said, I need a xylophone or I need a marimba or whatever, and he would send me to the warehouse, pick it out, and then I would work it off, and move on to the next instrument that way, which was good for me, but Steve was a really unique guy. I don't think I've ever met anyone like him. I don't think anyone will be quite like him in the percussion industry. He was a former percussionist himself. He studied with Mickey Buxban, the former principal percussionist of the Philadelphia Orchestra, my predecessor, actually. He decided that he really didn't have the drive or even the technique really to be a professional percussionist. He got into the transportation industry, worked for shipping with trains and trucks. And that's actually where he developed a skill of how to get things from one place to another the cheapest. And he literally bought percussion instruments and put them in the trunk of his car and would drive around town to various locations, Curtis, Temple, different schools around the area, and literally just open up his trunk and say, you want to buy any of this stuff? And that's kind of how he started. He got a row house. If you know the Northeast, that's a typical structure that people live in where they share common walls on either side. And he had one of those. It was a 3-story row house up in the far north Philadelphia. That's when I started working for him. It was just Steve. He had a secretary named Cheryl and me. It was just it. That was it. Steve used to not only take the orders, he used to run downstairs and pack them himself. It was a very bare bones thing. It still is actually. And that was one of the things that made it more affordable than other businesses because his profit margin was so small. Typically his profit margin was somewhere between 10 and 12% on anything. And if you talk to any retailer these days, most of them hate Steve Weiss because they feel like he's ruining their industry. And Steve's point was, hey, you can do it too if you want to, you just don't want to, So Steve had a soft spot in his heart for percussionists and musicians, and particularly world percussionists, people that were trying to acquire instruments that they normally couldn't get out of say a Musser catalog or a Yamaha catalog, whatever. If you wanted an instrument that you didn't even know what it was, but you just heard the name of, you call Steve up. Even if he didn't know it, he would find out and he would get it for you. And there are very few places that are, well, actually there are more places now, but at the time there were 0 places except Steve to go and get that kind of stuff. My experience with Steve, I worked with him while I was taking auditions. While I was in grad school, I went away and did a job in New Orleans for 5 years. I came back to Philadelphia where I was freelancing some with New York and Philadelphia. And I worked full time for Steve, 44 hours a week. He could be a difficult person to deal with on a day-to-day basis, but really he was just kind of a teddy bear. Yeah, he was a real softie ultimately. But I had students when I was in Houston Symphony, I would tell my students to call up Steve Weiss, and some of them would say, oh, I can't do that. And I would say, what are you saying? He said, well, the last time he yelled at me. And I get on the line and say, Steve, what the hell are you doing yelling at students? Aren't you an idiot? They're trying to buy stuff from you. Don't scare these kids away. And he's like, well, they didn't know what they want. It's like, well, why don't you try to be patient? So he could be a gruff guy, but
you have to tell about the list. Tell about the wall.
Oh, so up at Temple right now, I have a piece of wall cement. Well, not cement. It's plaster. It's wall plaster that was cut out of the wall when they sold that place and moved up to Willow Grove. They're in a completely different location now. But when I was working for him, I would go and take an audition. I would not win. I'd come back to work that following week, and he would very sincerely at first want to know how did the audition go. And I would say, I made the finals or runner-up or whatever it was. I got cut. And he would, like, for about 5 seconds seem, very concerned, like, oh, I'm sorry to hear that. And then he would grab a Sharpie and he'd bite the cap off of it, and he'd walk over to the wall and he would write the name of that city on what he called Chris Deviney's wall of shame.
Wow.
it was a long list of all the auditions that I lost. And
what a motivator.
if you came into Steve Weiss Music, you always came up to the second floor where his office was, and right at the stair at the landing, you would see this long list of cities, and every damn person that would come in that place would say, what's this list? And then Steve would explain, this is Chris's wall of shame, Deviney's wall of shame. And you know, I mean, it's funny now, you know, now I can really laugh at it, but at the time it you know, it was quite an ordeal, honestly.
I know you told us how many at Taps. How many was it?
I took 31.
31.
Oh, rub it in, Casey.
Yeah. No, he's open about it. He's out. You said that some retailers were saying Steve Weiss like is ruining the business. Why would they say that, or why were they saying that?
Because, you know,
Probably a long time.
well, okay,
Yeah.
so typically back then at least, and things haven't changed that much, but Steve would get an order, say somebody wanted to buy a Yamaha 5-piece drum set. Steve would literally call up Yamaha and say, drop ship it to California where this person's ordering it from. He didn't have to stock it.
Yeah.
He would just drop ship it. So Steve would make a much reduced profit margin, say 10% on a drum set that normally somebody would make 35% profit on because they're actually stocking it. So Steve figured out a way to sell the same exact equipment that everybody else was doing without having a showroom.
Yeah.
Kind of pre-internet.
Pre-internet.
Right.
Oh yeah, this was all before internet. And so essentially
Long
being a
time
mail
ago.
order shop, he could fly under the radar because he didn't have to stock predetermined amounts of product and display them for people to actually look at, and thereby cutting down on his overhead.
Yeah. Well, and you youngins listening probably don't remember this, but you used to have to go into a music shop. Like you had to go into your local music shop to buy some sticks, and sticks that would cost $12 on Steve Weiss, they could cost anything from $12 to $80 in that shop, you know, and it was ridiculous. And then you try to tell the person, is this really what this costs? And they'd fight you, and they were always rude. And I hated music stores. I mean, in music stores, I was so happy just to buy everything from Steve Weiss because, I mean, they just literally rip you off. And now I'm older. If I go into one, I'll say like, hey, I'll pay you this much for this if you want to give it to me.
Right.
When they're
When I
like,
was-
this is an amazing thing, and be like, no, it's not. It's worth this much. And
I found out about Steve Weiss when I was in high school, actually, and I called and ordered some stuff, and he just literally sent me a bill. He just said, send me a check. He would actually send orders to people with no credit card because I didn't have a credit card. I was in high school. And so I get this shipment one day. My mom says, there's a package for you. And I said, oh, great. I got the stuff. And she said, you got stuff. How did you pay for this stuff? And I said, oh, I didn't have to pay for it. You have to send them a check. And my mom said, what do you mean I have to send a check? I said, well, that's what he said to do. And she said, who is this guy? I mean, like, who does this?
yeah. Hey, what's a good markdown for sheet music? Is there a standard? I want more money. I'm tired of Randy taking so much of my money. What should I be charging?
Steve
more.
Steve typically actually did make more on sheet music than
Yeah.
10%. I think he made somewhere around between 30. I want to say 30.
Okay, yeah, that's about what I think it is. Okay,
And I
cool.
mean,
can
also
kinda
on that
calculate
note,
then.
where else can you get almost any of our sheet music other than just Steve Weiss? I mean,
Let me tell you a
I
story.
would.
When I first started working for Steve, Drums Unlimited had the largest collection of sheet music, not just sheet music, but method books and videotapes were new at the time, VHS videotapes of drum set players and so forth. And he wanted to compete with that. He wanted to go directly after Drums Unlimited at the time. And I said, okay, Steve, but you realize that like you don't even have a catalog that shows that you sell all this stuff. So what do you want to do about that? And he said, well, I don't know, you want to start putting that together? I said, okay. So that kind of became my job. I started actually listing all the method books that he currently had, but then he started ordering tons and tons of new music. Anything that Alfred put out, any of the big publishers, Meredith Music was a big one. Anyway, as they started to come in, I realized, well, somebody needs to grade these. Someone needs to know how to classify these things. Like obviously somebody who's a beginner is not going to be buying the same material as somebody who's advanced, and they need to understand the difference. So I literally started documenting, at least in my opinion, what, as a grad student at Temple, what I would consider to be beginner level versus advanced and all the levels in between. And so that's what I started doing. And then eventually I said, Steve, you're going to have to get this to where people see this online. And he fought me every step of the way. He was like, oh, I don't want to do that online stuff. It's just more expense and the setup costs and blah, blah, blah. And now actually these days, my understanding is when they come in, before they even open the door at 10 o'clock for the employees to come in, they've already got 60 orders to push out the door that day, you know, and it's all because of online sales. So, you know, sometimes even the owners that built the business, like Steve Weiss, didn't really see what ultimately the business would become.
It's so great now. I mean, I'm just amazed. One of our secretaries here also just were blown away. I mean, I'll order something today and it's here tomorrow. It's amazing how well oiled Steve Weiss is now. And I remember when it was not that way.
I just to sort of echo what Chris said, I really think that Steve Weiss and Martin Cohen, who's the founder of LP, are the two industry people that have affected us as percussionists probably more than most players, composers, etc. I mean, these are people that have just created what we have today. Steve Weiss also throughout the years has saved quite a bit of money on customer service. If you've ever called them, I remember I was 14 or 15 the first time I ever had a Steve Weiss order. My mother called to order Yellow After the Rain for me. And Steve Weiss picks up the phone, literally Steve Weiss, not an employee, but Steve Weiss, the man himself, picks up the phone and just says, "What do you want?" No hello, not how can I help you? I mean, it was just like, and like my teacher had warned us that's how they were. And but at the same rate, like, it's a pleasure to do business with them. Like, you're not going to find any better prices. The stuff gets there if you're on the East Coast in a day. Yeah, it's a very good business.
When Steve was no longer around, either managing the business day to day or after he died, Dan Sullivan, who took over Steve Weiss Music, definitely shifted the whole culture of customer service. But my favorite Steve Weiss story when I was working there was a phone call I witnessed where a guy calls up a dad calling up to order mallets for his daughter who played in the band. And the call went something like this. I need to order like some mallets or something like that for my daughter. And Steve already you can sense his blood pressure getting higher because he knows this guy doesn't really know what he wants. So he starts to try to patiently walk through, you know, okay, well, what kind of instrument is she playing? And the guy says, I don't know. I think it's xylophone or bells or something. And Steve says, oh, okay. Do you want yarn or chord, or do you want like phenolic, or, you know, the guy says, I think like hard, you know, something like that. And Steve says, okay, listen, do you want rattan? Do you want dowel? Do you want two-tone shafts? What do you want? The guy says, I don't know. I mean, you know, and the guy says, listen, and Steve then, to finish the call, he just had it with the guy. He said, what's your daughter's favorite color? Guy said, what do you mean? He said, what's her favorite color? And he said, I would say blue. He says, I'll send her some blue mallets. Boom.
Get something right at least.
and I said, Steve, and I was standing right there. I said, Steve, why are you doing this? The guy didn't know what he wanted. He has no idea. I was like, Steve, just pass it off to somebody else. Don't ruin your business like this. I mean, obviously, you know, they need some help and they need to have their hand be held, and that's fine. That's what we're all here for. But don't, you know, freaking destroy your business with idiotic comments like that. So these are kind of conversations that I had with Steve when I was working with him, for sure.
Wow. Are there Yelp reviews of Steve Weiss? I need to go look.
Oh gosh.
Casey, I think you had something.
Well, back then Yelp wasn't a thing, and if it was, it would have just killed him.
Oh my God,
it
yeah.
just would have killed him.
Is it true if you ordered the right kind of mallets?
This is not just because they're up the road from me here in Philadelphia, but I would still do all my business with Steve Weiss. Of course, I have a sentimental attachment, of course, because I work there, yes. But they're very good on customer service. Dan is constantly monitoring how things are perceived online, and if there's a problem, he'll fix it. So those days are over. But you know, that kind of attitude and that edge that Steve brought was kind of some of the charm of doing business with him, honestly.
Well, I know I always had to know, like, okay, have all your ducks in a row so that you can just get what you need, and, you know, have your mom's credit card with you when you call them, because
here's the funny thing. Because Steve worked a full day on Saturdays, he always listened to the Met Opera, always. And he knew more about opera than I knew at all. And I had played some operas in New Orleans, concert operas in other areas, and he always dabbled in trying to expand his thinking and knowledge of certain things. He was studying Hungarian for a while because he was of Hungarian descent. He only knew curse words mostly in Hungarian. He also then for a
and
while,
English.
and then for a while he was studying magic because in the little town in Hungary where he was from, his dad was a rabbi along with another rabbi whose last name happened to be Harry Houdini's family. And
Wow.
Steve was convinced that he was actually related to Harry Houdini, and so he wanted to like study his magic. And and I thought that was hilarious. One day he's reading this big thick book of Harry Houdini's magic tricks, and he's like trying to tell me all about it, and I'm just looking at him like, dude, you're not going to be a magician. What are you talking about? So,
You should have started your own wall of like crap Steve believes in magic. Hey, is it true if you ordered the right kind of mallets, like the Musser M51As, you'd get a dime bag in the mail with it?
No, not he would never send you anything like that in the mail because he did not believe in that. But there were quite a few stories working there where things popped up from time to time, and he had interesting, colorful friends around the neighborhood. Put it that way.
I've heard rumors.
Wow, funny. Yeah, dime bag is a word for like a small bag of weed.
I thought it was like 10 pennies in a bag.
A dime bag? No.
Like 10
Oh,
cents.
Ben.
All right, Ben, save us.
Well, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. Thank you, Patti and Chris, and we hope to see you on the next one, episode 243.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, y'all.
Thank
See you all.
you. Bye.